is not, and she goes on to say, this is not the end of it, because Xhosa is anglicizing, taking words from English and causarizing, should I say, what we did with words of French and Latin origin to make them look English. We took the suffixes off and made that part look English, and the rest we kept French or Latin or Greek. We kept it like that and put something recognizable for people. And what Xhosa is doing is exactly the opposite. What they're doing is they are putting a prefix E in front of a clearly English word, and they're giving their own spelling for that word, like e-accountancy. Okay, and it's just going to be spelt a little bit differently, but it is very clear where the origin lies. So they are amassing a huge number of words. So please don't take this as absolutely the answer that's got so few words. And there's more, of course, to be said about the words in Xhosa, but for another time, because we need to get on. I promised you something exciting, and you are questioning me already. I know it. All right. So the origin, folk etymology. All right. I have to put that in. What is folk etymology before I start on this lovely thing? Folk etymology is where there's a wonderful word history, but it has not been verified. It is not necessarily accepted. It is a lovely story, but for some folk etymologies, they've been refuted completely. But for others, it could be this or it could be that. So one story about the origin of the question mark comes from Alcuin of York, monk, who apparently used a sign like a lightning bolt from left to right. And that was his sign of a question, and that eventually evolved into the question mark. I don't like that one at all. It's not nearly as exciting as this one here. No. Remember I told you that before the printing press, books were copied by copyists, by scribes. And scribes would be copying from one scribe's work. Now scribe number 2 is copying that work. He's not able to read, what is that, an A, an E, what is that? So he would then put quaestio in the margin, reminding himself, question. I need to go back to scribe number 1 and ask him, what is this now? Okay? And of course this does mean that when they didn't bother to do that, there's so many different spellings that came up during the period before the printing press. This was very laborious to write quaestio. Can you imagine writing question? Ask every time. So it would be QO. From that QO, let's now fit it into the margin. It became a Q with a little taily dropped off there, O underneath. From there, question mark. Isn't that the nicer one? And I love that one, and I think it makes sense to me anyway. The other thing I just wanted to put on the board for you, I introduced you to Latin words. Those of you who have studied Latin and Greek, you would know how to spell these, but just for your edification, nasci, natus, one of the first word I actually introduced you to is the Latin word for to be born, so we get the word native from that. We also got renaissance via the French. So different, so French, it sounds so much more beautiful than renaissant. Okay, Latin was very kind of harsh sounding as opposed to the French softened everything. Colere cultus, that meant to cultivate, to inhabit, and we get from there colonial, and we're going to talk more about that today. Any other things about words? You want me to put anything on the board there? Okay, so let's just put on the power, and finally worked out how to work this. Technology, not my strong suit. Mm-hmm. Right, we just wait for the light to come on. Here we go. All right, so let's just take a step or two back to yesterday, that we were looking at the Middle Ages period into the early modern English era. And we saw that in the Middle Ages period, Middle English period. Lights. Marshall, where are the lights? He's my marshal. But it's actually Martian, hey? It's related to the god of war, I know it. Okay, better. Okay, so we were looking at the Middle English, and we saw that we had thousands of words of French origin, which I said to you, of course, means ultimately most of them you can trace back to Latin. So the heavy influence still, we have to say, of Latin. Then we move into the English, modern English era. It seems a funny word, hey, modern English era, because what are we now? Ultra-modern, I don't know. So we start off with the Renaissance and the very huge, powerful impact of Shakespeare. He's the king. I mean, he's the king. You know, who said Elvis was the king? No. Shakespeare was the king. And he was the king of linguistic originality, the king of literary inventiveness. I said to you, he coined over 2,000 neologisms during his writings. New words, but I just have to clarify that and say also new functions. I think I did mention it briefly yesterday. New functions, new grammatical forms of existing words. So we have, for example, one of the things I gave you was assassination. Assassin was a word accepted, coming from Hebrew, but he made assassination, and only later it became to assassinate. We're finding this kind of what is called conversion happening still today, where we are taking an original noun and we're making it into a verb, or a verb and we're making it into a noun. So conversion is happening all the time. That is also linguistically creative. So we have William Shakespeare, one of the two most influential people, writers, influencing literature and, of course, vocabulary. I said to you, Shakespeare used about 30,000 words in his works. Now we're going on to another hugely, sound like Donald Trump, hugely impactful things, is the introduction of the King James Bible, the translation of the Bible commissioned by King James I to be translated into English. Important for to bolster up the Church of England. He wanted that. He wasn't interested in the other translations. He wanted one that was going to deal with Church of England and so on. It is a hugely poetic translation. There were, I'm trying to remember how many scribes, I think about 72 or something, involved in the translations. They were Hebrew scholars. They were looking at the Hebrew versions. They were Greek scholars as well, and Latin scholars, and they would all come together and produce this marvelous translation of the Bible. There was a decision to make this a work that was going to be more formal. They weren't going to use translation words that were perhaps more to the tune of the modern speaking at the time. So in the writing of the King James Bible, only 8,000 words were used. So they kept it as close as possible to the translation they were using from Hebrew or Greek or Latin. So not using some linguistic creativity as such, but yet they kept it very beautiful and very poetic. The authorized version of, so now it's authorized, this is King James I. We go in and we go all the way up now to 1953. Anybody think of a significant occurrence in 1953? Queen Elizabeth II ascends the throne. Now, when she ascended the throne, she took, of course, the mantle of Queen of Britain, but she also swore to be the defender of the faith. And to that end, the Bible that she said we will be using is going to be the authorized King James I Bible. And any child that was born in the year of her coronation received an authorized version of King James, the Bible. That is how important she felt that this is. And if we go back even now to the time of when this Bible was first introduced, and for the centuries going on, for the families who were maybe not learned, just average, maybe some of them hadn't gone to school, whatever, they would aspire to own a Bible for the family. That Bible would be what their exposure to the written word, not just the word of religion. We're talking about the word of English and how to assimilate it and how to enjoy it better, the written word. So, and it was very, very expensive. So people would save for a long time, because originally this was still, before the printing press, is going to be, there was still some you could buy that had been copied. With the printing press, still fairly expensive because quite a big tome, but that is what they would use. So unfortunately, we can't go in this. I should have included it. You see, I've given you some interesting books to read. There's another wonderfully interesting book about King James, the Bible, with some fabulous things in it. So apart from giving us, for the people who, Church of England, etc., the King James Bible, let's see very interesting words and phrases, well, more phrases that this Bible has given into English. So even if you are not a religious person, if you're not a biblical scholar, doesn't matter. You will know, you will recognize what has come into general usage in English. So we look at my brother's keeper. Lordy, lordy, lordy. I probably did say that. My brother's keeper, an eye for an eye. To spy out the land, the signs of the times, out of the mouths of babes. How are the mighty fallen? There are many, many other instances and examples, but just to see, this is a very influential work of literature, not just religion, that has given us great idioms and so on in English. Oh, now we move to the modern English era. 1650 onwards. Oh my goodness, now here we are in 2017. As I say, I think it's a bit of a misnomer that we're still in the same period. We should be calling ourselves, I don't know, ultra-modern. We must invent a word. Anyway, modern English. Let's see what happens now. We have, because of the printing press has been brought into Britain, this is fantastic. There's now the move towards standardization of spelling. You've got all these anomalies of spelling with the various books, and now you want to standardize it. So indeed, we've got a start of the standardization, but we're still waiting for the dictionary. There were some word spelling lists, etc., available, but we haven't had an authoritative one yet. We have also different, the printing press gave rise to different types of writing. So we're not just talking about books. Suddenly you're looking at first newspaper. What is that going to bring in? It's headlines, a different way of writing. You're going to talk about, we'll see also the radio, etc., coming in. That's also going to give rise to different types of speech. 18th century, okay, grammar is going to be formulated according to Latin and Germanic grammar. As I explained yesterday, we're looking at the order of words, Germanic, the endings, the inflected endings of Germanic being dropped away and simplifying the English, all right? But still labeling so many of the grammatical functions according to Latin. Oh, now here's an interesting man. Here, enter the first dictionary that we take seriously, all right? And this is Samuel Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson. He wrote the first authoritative dictionary, 1755. It took him 9 years to write, okay? A hell of a lot shorter, of course, than the Oxford English Dictionary, but 9 years. And he basically undertook this task himself. He had a couple of students who assisted him in finding out this, that, and the other, but this is Dr. Johnson's dictionary. But I have to just say, now when you look at that, he had about 50,000 words. We're talking about the Oxford English Dictionary, 650,000 words. So what happened to the other 600? Well, they hadn't grown yet, but the actual words in circulation were many more. I've already shown you 120,000 in the modern English era. So, wow, what did he leave out? Dictionaries are written by humans. So it is the humans who make the decision about what goes in to the dictionary, what gets dropped out of the dictionary when it's no longer functioning. It's an archaic word, we're going to drop it out. So he was a Puritan. He refused to put in any words, swear words, no profanities allowed. He was very careful. Anything that was pejorative, except we'll see what he does himself. Any kind of word he didn't like, he didn't put it in, right? Too bad if you wanted it, not there. So we look at some examples here. So lexicographer, there's another Greek-based word for you. Lexis means word, graphane is to write. We already had that in yesterday's orthography. The graphy meaning writing of or recording of, so orthography, writing the correct spellings. So this is a writer of dictionaries, and this is his definition. A harmless drudge that busies himself in tracing the original and detailing the signification of words. That's his definition. Definitions have to be created by people, okay? He says, a patron, one who countenances, supports, or protects. That's pretty neutral, all right. Commonly a wretch who supports with insolence and is paid with flattery. Then a little bit of social history we can see here. Oats, a grain which in England is generally given to horses, but in Scotland supports the people. But nevertheless, huge strides into standardizing our spellings and, of course, giving us a resource to go and find definitions, albeit we might not agree with some of them. Now, we have Noah Webster's dictionary comes in quite significantly, well, about a sort of less than a century later, but Noah Webster, an American, he writes a dictionary which he feels must reflect American pride. We have thrown off the shackles of British imperialism. We are independent now, so we need our own dictionary. Now, of course, that for us, you know, in South Africa, we still use British spelling, and so when we see this thing, you go on the computer and it's autocorrect and it comes up the American spelling, you go, what now? You know, but there is the power of that American spelling. America is a powerhouse anyway. So he started off, he wrote 2 volumes which covered quite a lot of science, scientific, technical, a little bit of medical terminology, but he took pains to choose words that were American, that reflected the American culture. So the word like plantation, you didn't have that in Britain. There were no plantations, but he needed to put it in. Quite understandable. Congress, their choice for their political system to actually go back to Latin-based words, Congress. Okay, they love the Capitol Hill and the Congress, and so he put those words in, and that was great. The British really didn't like this at all, because apart from the new words which were particularly American, what they were critical about was his decision to change some spellings. He said, listen, this word colour has now, what is the point of the U there? It came from Latin, it was color. It's interesting, huh? Color, C-O-L-O-R. There was no U in Latin. But then it went through the passage of French. Oh, and the French wanted to soften it and bring in their own little identity. So the U appears in that period. And it stayed with our British spelling. So he says, no, it's not necessary. I'm dropping it out. Much to our chagrin, he's done it with obviously a lot of the words. And the British people said, okay, I'm listening to your justification. Mm-hmm. But what about, because he said there's no need for it at all. He said, what about the word like, I'm just trying to think, can I make up one now? Colorization, or no, that's not one. I'm trying to think of another interest. Where in English, with color at the base, let's think of one. No, we're still going to put a U in there. Neighbor. Labour. Oh, okay, yeah, let's take that one's better word. I'll come back to this colour in a moment. So, labour also has a U. He didn't want it, so he's going to just make it L-A-B-O-R. So the British say, no. If you're going to follow this, you've got to follow it all the way through. Say, I don't want the U because it's useless, okay? But he said, you're not following it through, because then, what would you say? Laborious? That's a plain O, you see. Where, moment, please. he messes things up a little bit. Let me see if I can find it. He messes it up. He tries to, here we are. Words. Let's find it over here. All right, so he says here. Okay, so forgive me for this one. So he wants the U out of the OU endings, and they didn't like it. He wants CE instead of the SE. And the British said, why? We wanted to make a distinction between a defence and a defence. Why are you doing this? He says, but why do we need that? Why do we need the distinction? No. So much to the irritation of, and I'll come back to colour, whatever, I'm somewhere else, but I'll find it. Much to the irritation of the British, his work started gaining ground. And, well, we can see it. We can see it in the internet, the power of the internet, that you can go and you're typing, and it's going to automatically correct you with the American, unless you're going to put in the British. So the power of the internet, World Wide Web, is the biggest resource of written texts ever in the world, ever has been and probably ever will be. So, we are bound by that. And American spelling is intruding upon that. So he says, this is according to him, it was partly a matter of honour as an independent nation to have a system of our own in language as well as government. So, again, we talked about linguistic pride, that when we had these invasions in Britain, the English, the Britons, the Celts, whichever period we're looking at, they were so excited when the invaders left or they were assimilated, they could take their linguistic pride back. So people have a pride in their own language, and certainly the Americans as well. What I want to just mention before we move on, and I know how to do this now. Yes. What I want to mention is we see this huge amalgam of words coming from French, from Latin, and of course to the existing English. So what this gave rise to is quite an interesting phenomenon. Okay, that's enough. It gives rise to where three words mean similar things, but they come from different roots, and we use them in a different sort of register. So, for example, we will have rise. We look at the etymology, Germanic, okay, Old English. We will look then the French, mount. We will look at ascend. Okay. This we would still trace back to Latin, by the way, but it is going to be the sort of French that they put in for us. You would look at something like king, royal, regal. Three languages, but they've become English, anglicized, and used with similar meanings, but in different circumstances, different contexts. And we will see when we talk about the words from Latin origin and Greek origin that in using them, they are of a higher register. So, if you're chatting to your friend, you're not going to say, are you going to ascend the stairs today? No, I'm going to rise and climb, use an ordinary one. You're not going to mount anything, no. He's the king. But if you're going to behave in a regal way, that's kind of more formal, isn't it? Right? Kingly would be a little bit less. So very interesting phenomenon occurring at this period. So what we've seen also, this period that we've just talked about, that early modern English, the Middle Ages, was the start of that amazing ability or love that the English have of borrowing from all over the place. Shakespeare, their very own, our very dear, said, neither a borrower nor a lender be. Well, no notice about that. The English, very happy to borrow from all over the world. So, we're moving into the 19th century. What big things are happening here? Well, what happened just at the beginning, towards late 18th century, beginning 19th century, this standard English has and emerged. And it's kind of the English that we understand as standard English today. A few twitches and changes here and there. But the loss of inflections, the spelling has been standardized, the grammar is standardized. So we're looking at an English we understand, that we can still understand today. But what historic cultural events happened in the 19th century that impacted upon our English language, particularly our vocabulary? Well, it was a time of amazing strides in medicine, science, technology. Now, for all of these words, you've got to find a word. You can't say, listen, this little thingamajig, okay? You say, that thingamajig has got to have a name, and if medical, the doctors have to think, oh, yeah, so now I'm operating on this guy's back, and I've just found this funny little thing here. For the life of me, it looks like a cuckoo's beak, which is a coccyx. So I think we'll just call it a coccyx, coming from the Greek. That's a very nice word. Then everybody knows what that is. So they were tasked with finding words for these medical, scientific, and technological advances. Where did they look? Mostly they looked to Latin and Greek, because encapsulated, usually in one word of Latin or Greek origin, you can say one word. It says a lot that requires, in everyday English, a lot of words to describe. So it's very much more to the point, and so that is where they looked for roots of these new words. They would, of course, anglicize a lot of them by putting an English suffix on, so it seems familiar to us, but they nevertheless are the roots. We have the invention of the telephone and the radio. Oh my goodness, people thinking this is going to be just terrible. I mean, they were shouting into this instrument. They think, how are they going to hear me? And this is going to stop all social activity. It's so scary. What do we need this thing for? Radio. Well, radio, the same thing, that you're using the radio waves, radium, giving us the rays, how this was created. And radio, oh gosh, do we need this? It's going to be destroying the fabric of our society. But of course it did not. And in fact, what it gave rise to was to new types of speech. You now have the broadcasting, which is, you've got sports broadcasting, which is a particular type of speech. If you love your rugby or your cricket, you're listening to the broadcaster. He's going to be short. He's using particular kind of words. You've got, what other kind of weather broadcasting? Most of the TV stations have got a dedicated weather person standing, and now we're looking at over here and rains over there. A person doing just weather. Okay, so this was a very big thing that grew and grew and grew, and still grows today. Although, of course, we've got the internet, we've got the computer. Now's the one, and the gentleman was asking me about this. This is the big thing. British colonialism. What is British colonialism? That is where the Britons, they have become the powerhouse now. They are now wanting to expand their borders, not dissimilar to the Romans. When the Roman Empire kept expanding, we're great, we're powerful, expanded, and they went out into all corners of the world. So the British wanted to do the same for reasons of commerce, trading. We know they landed up here in South Africa. We're on the trade route for India. And this now brought in hundreds, I didn't say thousands of words from other languages, because they were meeting with different peoples who ate different foods, who wore different clothes, who had different devices or things that they used as transport, whatever. Now, instead of trying to find a word in English similar to that, I thought, well, I don't know one. So if I'm going to try and describe this, I'm going to have to describe it. Let's try and describe saffron. What are you going to do to describe saffron? I said, well, it's very thin. It's a spice, and it's. How are you going to do that? So when they went and they saw, what is this that you're putting into the food? It's called saffron. Right, we'll call it saffron. Why? Why not? Why not? So they were happy to do that. And we have an enormous number of words. Look at the extent of the Yes, it dropped off a bit there. But we're looking at the British Empire all over the place and words coming from there. Let's look at some examples of words. These are called loan words, borrowed words. I'm just picking just little. So from Hebrew, what everybody uses, amen or amen, rabbi, Messiah. Okay, we all understand what those mean. You can imagine saying, that fellow who is donned with this particular garb, what is he? He's a rabbi. Oh, right, okay. So you don't want to describe this in saying a priest who speaks Hebrew, who studies rabbinical text. We call him a rabbi, okay, right, that sounds fine. Yiddish, interesting. From Yiddish we get kosher, kugel, chutzpah. Now one would think that Hebrew and Yiddish would belong to the same language family. One would think, yeah? I mean, I would think so anyway. But in actual fact, it is not so. Your Hebrew is a non-Indo-European language. It doesn't belong to the family tree of Indo-European languages, which is where we position our English. English, I said to you, was a Germanic, in the Germanic families, together with your Afrikaans and your Scandinavian Dutch and so on. Yiddish fits into the Germanic family. Because of the migration, the movement of Jews into Germany, they then were assimilated into Germany and they created geographical disconnect. They created their own language. And we have to also remember that Hebrew was not, modern Hebrew was resurrected not all that long ago, really. So this is a Germanic-based language. Arabic, we get admiral, saffron here, there we go. Mattress, hadn't seen that before. What is that you're lying on? You'll be calling it, it's nice and soft, but they did it a different mattress. Okay. Zero, coming from Arabic. In the Roman numerals, I'm not sure. I'm hoping we'll have time to look at Roman numerals and origins of words from Latin numbers. I hope so. I'm not sure that we'll get that far. But the Romans didn't have the concept of zero. They took it from the Arabs. Alcohol, Arabic, anything actually with this little prefix al, so is going to be usually Arabic. It's kind of the same thing as saying the. Hungarian, Finnish, Turkish, oh, people love their food. Look at this, goulash, yes. Paprika, in Britain at the time, I don't think they had goulash, they would just have summa stew. Paprika, lovely spice. And of course, the clothing, turban. Now you can imagine the British going and you're meeting new peoples and they're wearing different garb. They say, well, what is that you're wearing on your head? So they say, it's a turban, or they might say, it's fez. They go back. Nobody at that time in Britain was wearing a turban or a fez. So they had to have a word. They took it back and said, this is actually what this is. Today, Britain, like much of the world, multicultural, multilingual, and so on. So you would go to Britain, you'd see lots of people with turbans and lots of people wearing fezzes. That's fine. But it was not at that time. Not at the time of this reaching out to the rest of the world. Coffee, caviar. Yeah. Chinese and Thai, we're looking also at foodstuffs, and we're looking at clothing. Silk coming from here. Ginseng. Tea. And it's funny when if you listen to some kind of local English, British, they'll say, do you want to come and have a cup of cha? A cup of cha. So when you go and look up the origin of tea, you will see it is cha. So it came directly in from that. Ketchup, did you know it was not the Americans who introduced that? Hey, no, ketchup comes from Chinese, and they describe it as a tomato-based sauce. So today we think, American, definitely ketchup, I want some ketchup. Japanese, kamikaze, tsunami. Sadly, we've seen so much of that sort of in recent times, haven't we? Shame. Tycoon, soy, another foodstuff. Malay and Polynesian, gingham, material, bamboo, and junk, not in the stuff that's in your garage, junk as in a type of a little boat. American Indian, caucus, wigwam, moccasin. They'd go and look at these, where are you living? I'm living in a wigwam. There were no wigwams in Britain, so we have to just say, right. You might have been forgiven to think that caucus, with the US ending, my Latin compatriots here, that would come from Latin, but it doesn't. It's actually an American Indian word. So I always put that to my students. I say, okay, odd one out. Which of the following words is not Latin in origin? Mexican Indian, oh, yummy. Foodstuffs again, avocado, tomato, chili, and clothing, poncho. Inuit, Eskimo, also, wow. Where do you live? I live in an igloo. How do you describe? They live in an ice house. Okay, so we'll just call it an igloo. Kayak, their particular type of canoeing, and which has become, of course, now favorable around the world. Canoeing. You've got that Oxford-Cambridge rowing race, the big rowing race, and so people are very familiar today with what a kayak is, what a canoe is, but it was not so in Britain at that time. African, we also give rise to lots of words: zebra, bundu, banana, okra, yam, foodstuffs once again, and of course the animals that they had not seen. And we're going to go bundu bashing. Yes, we'll see some other ones as well. Afrikaans giving us veld, trek, bakkie. Bakkie was introduced into the Oxford English Dictionary in 2010, along with tackies. Because you say to somebody from overseas, have you brought your tackies with you? What? Are you bringing your walking shoes or your what? Trainers? Tackies, yes. Biltong, rooibos, and of course rooibos. I didn't realize this, but we'll talk about it as we're moving on. Yeah, rooibos is particularly a product of South Africa, and it is a trade name. You're not allowed to use this, call anything rooibos, that if you've even got the same bush overseas, doesn't matter. Same as champagne. So we'll come to that just now. So yes, we're very proud of rooibos. Hindi, basmati, chutney, bungalow, veranda. They didn't need the words in British English, bungalow and veranda. You go to Britain, you're not having these big verandas because you don't need to keep the heat out. You want to bring the heat in. So verandas were not things to have. Bungalow, the same idea of architecture. Shampoo coming from Hindi. And then very own homegrown is vuvuzela. We have exported this notion, we've exported this machine, which people hate, of course, would make such a loud noise. But from our 2010 Soccer World Cup, very interesting thing happens. You can see this is a tubular shaped, like a trumpety shape. And in 2010, how wonderful and coincidental that here in the Western Cape, a new flower was discovered. Now, this vuvuzela coming from the Zulu supposedly to make a voo-voo noise. Voo-voo, okay? It makes more than that, I think. And so we have the flower of the iris family, discovered in 2010 in the Western Cape. And here we had the Soccer World Cup here. You know, there was one of the things here. And of course, we will talk about it when we come to our talking about the Linnaean dealing with classification of plants and animals and any living things. Everything is classified according to the Linnaean system, Carl von Linné. And so that means the first, when this was discovered, the first thing, anything new that's discovered, if it's a butterfly, a fish, anything, you've got to apply to the international body of nomenclature, where they apply the binomial, bi is two, binomial classification of every living thing according to Latin. Now, this was not the case. It was originally according to Greek, all right? But we'll talk more about that. But what I'm just going to briefly tantalize you again, so wait for this part. But just to tell you, the first one, Moraya, it's got the Latinized ending there, is the iris. And then they said, please describe for us what this plant looks like. So they wrote in and said, well, it looks like a vuvuzela. So I said, what's a vuvuzela? Well, it's a trumpet-like thing. And they said, okay, we'll keep it a vuvuzela. It's got a Latinized sort of ending. So that looks fair. Yeah. So you can look that up as one of our plants. 20th and 21st century. We know all about it. We are not the technologists of the world. That's the millennials and pre-millennials. Technology makes explosive advances. I'm quite amazed. Queen Elizabeth wow, she sent her first email in 1976. I think I probably only sent my first one about 1986. I don't know. So that's amazing. Electronic mail starting there. World Wide Web, which we take so for granted now. I mean, do you ever think of anything? You just go www, okay? World Wide Web. It's not that old. 1991, but look how it has grown and how we've come to depend on it. 1998, the Google search engine was invented. All right, so I've put a little asterisk there. In 1996, I'm going to tell you a little story about that Google in the next slides. So internet, okay, there we've got our internet. Now we have SMS arriving. So World Wide Web is there. Now we've got 2000, we've got texting, short messaging service, blogging. Yep, okay, 2003. 2004, Facebook. YouTube, 2005. Twitter, 2006. It is said that Twitter today, about 6,000 tweets are sent out per second. 6,000 tweets per second. That's probably conservative. WhatsApp. I love WhatsApp, yeah. WhatsApp is 2009. And now we've got Instagram. Ching, ching, ching. So what we're seeing in the evolution of words, which we are now going to be almost ready to move into, is we're seeing with these creations of social media, they are creating words with them. They are also reflecting society, reflecting how it is kind of a me, myself, I, and let me get myself out there and whatever. It's the social media is big, a big influence. Okay, so resources. I've given you a little handout there. So this is absolutely, there are many more dictionaries. I've just put these. You may at home have a dictionary, Collins, the Oxford Concise. No one owns, unfortunately, or can own the huge thing. I wish I could. Oh my God. Anyway, they're so expensive. Even the big 2-volume one is very expensive. But you might have Merriam-Webster. Be careful. That is an American dictionary, okay? So spelling. But they're being very nice in the latest dictionaries, both in the Oxford, British, from that British point of view, and from the Merriam-Webster. They're giving you both spellings. They will say in brackets, American spelling. Or Merriam-Webster will say, but British spelling. So they're highlighting there is still this distinction in spelling. There are a lot of websites. You will find, because you are all interested in words, it is a fabulous thing to go onto the oed.com. There are so many things to click on there. They are amazing. There are 40 videos that are created by the team of the Oxford Dictionary. The Oxford Dictionary's got averagely about 200 scholars and scholars and researchers, about another 200 readers, which is where people reading anywhere in the world, they are readers. You must read any type, internet stuff, any kind of written thing, and if you come across a new word, you will put it into a data bank. And every time you see that word, it goes into the data bank. This is how that Global Language Monitor, did anyone go and look at that, by the way? No. Global Language Monitor, how they are able to say, oh, I see that this has come in, it's in this data bank, and I'm going to now click on it, and they say, oh, that's appeared that many times. You have to have 25,000 citations where this word came from. When did you see it? And this is what will go in. But it's fascinating. So really well worth, you're not going to be reading the dictionary just for definitions. You'll see such interesting things on this website. Okay. Then dictionary.com, Oxford Dictionaries, Cambridge, Merriam-Webster. You're going to have a lot of, when I say, let's go and investigate a word. What's the history of that word? Interesting word, which I've asked you to look up a few tonight, maybe if you want to. Etymonline, etymology.com, Word Detectives, you're going to be word detectives, word origins, there's a number of sites. Very interesting things. So now, I've asked you at the bottom of that one page that you've got to look up some interesting etymologies for me. So what do I mean by that? I want the linguistic history. So how are you going to be looking for that? You will go into the dictionary, and if it's following a sort of formal, standardized way of doing things, Well, all etymologies are in reverse chronological order. So my interest would be, can you take me all the way back to the first language? Where was it born? Where was it born? So, in other words, if you go to a dictionary, like a small dictionary, I'm afraid with dictionary size does count. Okay? Yes. You're going to go to this dictionary. It's going to take you only back to, say, French. If it's saying French, go and find a bigger dictionary. It's going to take you back to Latin, all right? So we're looking at reverse chronological order, but there are different ways that dictionaries do it, and of course, they are also becoming modernized and saying we're online now, so some dictionaries will just put in origin, colon, da-da-da-da. The formal thing would be square brackets, and there are others, they'll say derivative. Okay, let's have a look at some examples. So the language from which, the way it'll go is, the first thing you see when you find the etymology will be the language from which this modern word is taken. I'm so interested in that. Nope. The form of the word in that language. No. The linguistic history, ending with the earliest form of that word. Yes, and they'll give you the form of that word. So let's look at the word that is currently, thank you, Donald, one of the most looked up words. It's not a new word, but it is one of the most looked up words in 2016. I'm going to give you a list of those when we get to the evolution of English language. Misogyny, fascism, etc. Most looked up. They've skyrocketed. So just look at this. It tells you. This is a very different way of doing it. Comes from Greek. Misos, there's the word. Misos means hatred. Gune or gyne means woman. And it gives us misogyny. And they tell you it came in meaning this in the 17th century. You don't have to worry too much about that. I just want to see, can you see where it comes from? But just this piece, this little slide I've put in, look at neutral meaning, hatred of woman. Okay, here it comes. It's kind of used, whoa, used a lot, and whoa, used, in 2016, right up there. So we look at the Oxford English Dictionary's way that they're going to put in this misogyny. You've got your pronunciation, misogyny, and it tells you a bit there. And of course, the Oxford English Dictionary gives us citations of the dates, where did we see them first? That's going to be listed for you. But essentially, it tells you straight, it comes from Greek. There's the concise Oxford, that's a little bit less misogyny, very simple. Also 17th century from misos, hatred, etc. And the Collins giving us something pretty similar. So it doesn't matter how you get to the etymology. Notice in this one, a Collins one, they're using the square brackets. That, for a lot of the older dictionaries, that is how you will find your etymology. Okay. So that's the end of that section. So, do you want questions, or do you want to start on the next little bit of evolution of English vocabulary? How are you feeling? A little bit, so we can start? Okay, right. Yay. Okay. Yes.
The vowel shift, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to attend yet.
Oh, okay.
So can you, in a few words, very few,
okay.
tell me this, explain
the great vowel shift. This occurred now, when vowels had one sound, and for some unknown reason, there was a linguistic shift, and that sound changed. So let me say, if I take night as in opposite of day, it would be nicht. Then it becomes night. And no problem. Okay. You may ask as many as you like.
All borrow words are mainly nouns. What happened to adverbs, pronouns, verbs particularly? Has English brought...
English created those. So we can bring it...
We don't borrow the verbs so much. We just borrow nouns to describe foreign.
No, we borrow from anywhere. Particularly when we get to the Latin section, we're going to see, say, if we are borrowing from a noun, let's say the word formula, okay? we will now, well, that one's a bad one because that keeps the Latin ending. Miles militis means a soldier. So I can take that noun from Latin and I can make it into military as an adjective. I can make it into militant, another adjective. I can make it into militarize as a verb. So we have absolutely no borders. I can take a verb, a Latin verb. We could take cedere quesus, to go, to yield. And I can say, I can make that into procession, a noun, proceed, a verb, proceedings, a different kind of noun, procedure. So English is amazingly variant. It'll do all, it doesn't matter at all.
Part of the question is pronouns.
Oh.
In Latin and Greek you don't have pronouns.
Ah. Okay, so Latin and Greek, the pronoun is in the ending of the verb, okay? Where the pronouns themselves came from, that's going to be your Germanic.
Well, I think that was the latest.
Oh, was that your question, pronouns? I thought you were talking... Okay, so pronouns were separate, standalone things. In Latin, as in clause, since we were talking about clause earlier, the pronouns are absorbed by the word itself. So we don't, very rarely, we do have pronouns, but we very rarely use them as a subject, unless you're just being very egocentric, maybe. And I say, ego, doing this, you don't really need them. So, yeah.
Where did they come from?
Oh, where did the pronouns come from? Ooh. Well, they are Germanic, all right. So I'd have to look whether it was originally the Proto-Indo-European, because how that impacted it going through to the areas of Europe and so on. But of course, the Romance languages come from there too. So they evolved their own. Yeah, I'll think of that.
So I think it's worth mentioning when you were talking about the question box, that in Latin and Greek, the point of a question is identified by the grammatical order of the words and some of the words in there, like name, indeed. So they didn't have question marks as such. They got the question across to the... Which was
beautiful when the order of language was following Latin. So where your verb is at the end or your question is at the end, you'd know that that's where it stops. I can take a breather, okay? Well, that's your question. The ne at the end. But nay at the end can also be at the end of the first word. It doesn't have to be the end of a sentence. Okay. Can we come and chat about that afterwards? But maybe it's time rather to do question time then. Or do you want to do... Okay, do you want to come chat to me afterwards and then we'll formulate something? Okay, all right. We'll just have a little start into this second section. We're going to look at the evolution now of vocabulary. We've been looking at how English evolved as a response to all of these invasions, to various cultural events and people like Shakespeare, etc., giving us more and more words in English. But now, how does English continue to evolve? What happens? What has happened and what continues to happen? We look first at the Latin word evolvere, meaning to roll out. Volvere, to roll, and is out. So it's the gradual development of something. So we've seen a development over time. Things are speeding up now, that is for sure. It's not so gradual anymore. So we're just going to look at one thing today, and that is neologisms, because you're familiar with that word. I've told you that Shakespeare created so many of his own new words. Not an easy thing to do, maybe easier to change the grammatical function, but it's not an easy thing to do. Neos is new, logos is word. So what is a neologism? Okay, completely new word, created without any connection to existing words or roots. So we look at, for example, words that are no longer neologisms, but they came into English as neologisms. And when you look at the etymology, that says unknown. We don't know where this word came from. So these are no longer, the asterisk saying, no longer neologisms, all right? These are accepted words, all right? Dog. Now, the Germanic word for a dog was Hund, okay? The hound. So English took in hound. Where did dog come from? Well, we have no idea. Some person must have had this little animal, and somebody said, oh, that's so cute. What is it? Dog. And then you go to the next person, you know, it's like that chain, you know, what did you say? What is that? said that that's a dog. Oh, really? Yes, okay. And so it became dog. No reason why. Jam, as in, the jam on your bread. An interesting word in itself, because now I'm giving you the etymology, giving you this as a neologism, jam as the stuff you eat. But of course, there's an example. We've taken this word and we've made it into a verb to jam up something. Okay, creativity of English. So, jam, I have no idea. We don't know where it came from, but it's probably some little tyke tugging at Mommy's skirt and apron and saying, "What are you making, Mommy? What are you making?" No, she doesn't want to say, I'm actually taking the rind of the orange and some juice and some sugar, and I'm making jam. Okay, jam it is. Many neologisms were created out of onomatopoeic words. Cuckoo just sounds like a cuckoo. Buzz. The word boy. No etymology for that. No known origin of that word. Okay, and you'll also see, I think I've given you the word girl as well to look at. Hijack. Well, it doesn't mean hijack. We know what it means, but somewhere, I don't think a jack was involved at all. But it came to mean being held up. Condom. Well, sure. You know what the French say. The French say this is an English cap. And the English say it's a French letter. Anyway, condom is the neutral one. 2014 word of the neologism is oversharer. Oversharer is somebody who shares too much information on the social media. Okay? Stop oversharing. Oh, today I got up at 8:30 and I had a cup of coffee and it was so lovely. Who cares? Right. Brexiteer. 2016. Coming from Brexit, which in itself is a new coinage which has been accepted. We look at a new combination of existing words. This can also be a way that we call neologistic. Gender fluid. That's our 2016, 2017, one of the words now that is going into the Oxford Dictionary. We'll wait and see whether it stays. It'll come in first as colloquial, then we'll see whether it's going to stay. So we've got gender fluid, a person whose gender identity and gender expression is not fixed and shifts over time or depending on the situation. Right. Sharenting. Sharenting, also a new word. It's a blend of a word, by the way, sharenting, where the parents share too much about their children on social media. Oh, and little Johnny scored his first try of it. Inconvenience fee. This, for example, Mariah Carey is demanding a $50 million inconvenience fee from James Packer, her fiancé who dumped her, saying he has highly inconvenienced her. She wasted her time. So she wants an inconvenience fee. Sleep divorce. A sleep divorce is where you decide as a couple you no longer want to sleep in the same bed or in the same bedroom. But you're not going to divorce, it's only about the sleeping arrangements. Digital divorce. You can go online now and do your own divorce. Okay, much cheaper. Bird's nest parenting. That is where the parents are divorced, but they keep the family home, and instead of the children going 1 week to dad and 1 week to mom into their two different places, they stay in their family home and the parents come in. You know, like when the bird goes, mommy bird and daddy bird go to get the worms for the little chicks, they come back to the nest. You can have a new meaning for existing words. A mouse. Give that about 60 years ago, would have just been described as this little grey furry creature that women scream when they see and jump on a chair. Now I'm looking at my mouse. Oh, my mouse is not working. My mouse is working. Icon, a Greek word meaning simply a statue. And now we look at the icons on our computer. Twitter used to only refer to birds or girls who were giggling, you know. Now we've got, I'm tweeting, and he sent out so many tweets, and Twitter, the Twitter feed. And it's created a whole lot of other words. Twitterati, okay, the Twitter sphere, yes. And of course, make America great again. A new one is hyphen, not a hyphen, apostrophe, America, short for America. And so we'll see what happens with that one. And then, of course, new meanings for existing words in slang, where, I don't know if you've heard children, youngsters saying, "That's so sick, Granny." I said, "Oh, no, really sick? What? Are you not feeling at all well? What's happening?" That means, great. That was really a wicked thing to do. Wicked, bad. No, it means it's cool. And even cool. What about cool? And then lastly, we look at adulting. This is also where somebody, your 25-year-old daughter or son phones you from their digs and, "Guess what, Mom? I'm actually cooking supper tonight." Are you? Lights. Marshall, where are the lights? He's my marshal. But it's actually Martian, hey? It's related to the god of war, I know it. Okay, better. Okay, so we were looking at the Middle English, and we saw that we had thousands of words of French origin, which I said to you, of course, means ultimately most of them you can trace back to Latin. So the heavy influence, still, we have to say, of Latin. Then we move into the English, modern English era. It seems a funny word, hey, modern English era, because what are we now? Ultra-modern, I don't know. So we start off with the Renaissance and the very huge, powerful impact of Shakespeare. He's the king. I mean, he's the king. You know, who said Elvis was the king? No. Shakespeare was the king. And he was the king of linguistic originality, the king of literary inventiveness. I said to you, he coined over 2,000 neologisms during his writings. New words, but I just have to clarify that and say also new functions. I think I did mention it briefly yesterday. New functions, new grammatical forms of existing words. So we have, for example, one of the things I gave you was assassination. Assassin was a word accepted, coming from Hebrew, but he made assassination, and only later it became to assassinate. We're finding this kind of what is called conversion happening still today, where we are taking an original noun and we're making it into a verb, or a verb and we're making it into a noun. So conversion is happening all the time. That is also linguistically creative. So we have William Shakespeare, one of the two most influential people, writers, influencing literature and, of course, vocabulary. I said to you, Shakespeare used about 30,000 words in his works. Now we're going on to another hugely, sound like Donald Trump, hugely impactful things, is the introduction of the King James Bible, the translation of the Bible commissioned by King James I to be translated into English. Important for to bolster up the Church of England. He wanted that. He wasn't interested in the other translations. He wanted one that was going to deal with Church of England and so on. It is a hugely poetic translation. There were, I'm trying to remember how many scribes, I think about 72 or something, involved in the translations. They were Hebrew scholars. They were looking at the Hebrew versions. They were Greek scholars as well, and Latin scholars, and they would all come together and produce this marvelous translation of the Bible. There was a decision to make this a work that was going to be, this is not, and she goes on to say, this is not the end of it, because Xhosa is anglicizing, taking words from English and causarizing, should I say, what we did with words of French and Latin origin to make them look English. We took the suffixes off and made that part look English, and the rest we kept French or Latin or Greek. We kept it like that and put something recognizable for people. And what Xhosa is doing is exactly the opposite. What they're doing is they are putting a prefix E in front of a clearly English word, and they're giving their own spelling for that word, like e-accountancy. Okay, and it's just going to be spelled a little bit differently, but it is very clear. where the origin lies. So they are amassing a huge number of words. So please don't take this as absolutely the answer that it's got so few words. And there's more, of course, to be said about the words in Xhosa, but for another time, because we need to get on. I promised you something exciting, and you are questioning me already. I know it. All right. So the origin, folk etymology. All right. I have to put that in. What is folk etymology before I start on this lovely thing? Folk etymology is where there's a wonderful word history, but it has not been verified. It is not necessarily accepted. It is a lovely story, but for some folk etymology. On the board for you, I introduced you to Latin words. Those of you who have studied Latin and Greek, you would know how to spell these, but just for your edification, nasci, natus, one of the first word I actually introduced you to is the Latin word for to be born, so we get the word native from that. We also got Renaissance via the French. So different, so French. It sounds so much more beautiful than Renaissant. Okay, Latin was very kind of harsh sounding, as opposed to the French softened everything. Colere cultus, that meant to cultivate, to inhabit, and we get from there colonial, and we're going to talk more about that today. Any other things about words? You want me to put anything on the board there? Okay, so let's just put on the power and finally worked out how to work this. Technology, not my strong suit. Right, we just wait for the light to come on. Here we go. All right, so let's just take a step or two back to yesterday, that we were looking at the Middle Ages period into the early modern English era. And we saw that in the Middle Ages period, Middle English period, they've been refuted completely. But for others, it could be this, or it could be that. So one story about the origin of the question mark comes from Alcuin of York, monk, who apparently used a sign like a lightning bolt from left to right, and that was his sign of a question, and that eventually evolved into the question mark. I don't like that one at all. It's not nearly as exciting as this one here. No. Remember I told you that before the printing press, books were copied by copyists, by scribes. And scribes would be copying from one scribe's work. Now, scribe number 2 is copying that work. He's not able to read. What is that? An A, an E? What is that? So he would then put quaestio in the margin, reminding himself, question. I need to go back to scribe number 1 and ask him, what is this now? Okay? And of course, this does mean that when they didn't bother to do that, there's so many different spellings that came up during the period before the printing press. This was very laborious to write quaestio. Can you imagine writing question? Ask every time. So it would be QO. From that QO, let's now fit it into the margin. It became a Q with a little taily dropped off there, O underneath. From there, question mark. Isn't that the nicer one? And I love that one, and I think it makes sense to me anyway. The other thing I just wanted to